Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Nicole Engman on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from Utah. She's an IFBB bikini pro, but most importantly, she's our current guest. So first of all, what is the weather like in Utah right now?
It's really hot. It's probably about 90 degrees already. Yeah, 90 degrees and climbing. So,
Oh yeah, well it's similar to that in Minnesota. I mean, it's a little bit cloudier, which I mean is good if you have my skin color. It's not to be outside. When it's that hot outside. But before I depress everyone with my skin woes, why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what inspired and what motivated you to get in shape and adapt this healthy and fit lifestyle?
I did take weightlifting in high school, but it was just a class in a grade and it wasn't like English or math. So why not? And then I stopped. And then after I had my two kids, I realized I needed to do something to be active. I tried running, I tried yoga, and it just always felt like a chore and like a burden. And then my husband and I signed up at the gym, and I walked in and was a cardio bunny for a couple weeks until he told me, you're lifting weights with me today. And I did. And then ever since that day, it was love at first touch of the iron.
Yeah.
So
No, and that's just so great because I mean, so many people that I do talk to, especially the women, they start out as the cardio bunnies, but then when they first realize that, like, hey, go and touch the weights. But I always love to say, I mean, if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to, I mean, their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to the overall package that people end up seeing. Was that a struggle for you when you were getting started, just to sort of realize that, hey, if you were to walk up to someone, you know, and say, what did you train for this body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time is not going to work as good for you.
yeah, and I mean, and that's always the case with everyone and everything. Some of them, like, there's some people they really can't even, I don't know, they can't run, they can't do this. With anything we do in life, we're different and we can't compare what we're going through to what they're going through. So, yeah, sometimes I'm like, dang, why can't I have her shoulders? I can lift so much more. But yeah, I just have to accept it.
That's just the genetic bug that yeah, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But that leads me perfectly into my next question because I always love to ask all of our health and fitness guests. Everyone has that one body part when they get started that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much when they get started in the gym. But everyone always has that one body part as well that just lags behind that they just have to train into absolute overdrive. I'll give you mine first. I mean, for me, my back was something that really, really took off because I mean, I had jobs all throughout college of, working in warehouses, lifting and loading, heavy packages where you got a really nice back or you quit. Those were basically the two options that were presented to you. But I'm also 6'3", so my legs are just absolutely shot where I mean, I have to train them into overdrive just to get them to look like any semblance like I work out at all. And I mean, I still have friends in the gym that make the joke whenever I walk in, "Hey Ryan, you ever plan on working out legs this year?" and stuff like that. So yeah, I get that all the time. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
Well, my lagging body part is, like I kind of already said, my shoulders. I have to train them really hard. I've gone in and retrained with my coach and even dropped the weight, just really focus on the mind muscle connection. And I feel like I've progressed always, but it's just so dang slow, so it can be frustrating. And then yeah, my legs, they grow and develop, and they they cut, and yeah, but I always train them really hard too. So it wasn't easy. It's just they're not my shoulders.
I always say calves are my number one pet peeve just because that's the number one genetic thing where I mean, I always said I could inject pure muscle into my calves and they wouldn't grow an ounce. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's just never going to happen. But one of the things that I really found interesting about all out of all the guests that I have on is that a lot of them do time under tension training. Is that something that you like to do when you're going to the gym?
No, I do count my negatives. I try to count to 3 or 4 seconds and just really focus on the eccentric and the whatever. Um,
Yeah.
I can't say that word,
Oh,
but,
yeah.
yeah, I just try to really focus on, 1 up, 3 seconds to 4 seconds down, just really feel the muscle through it all.
Yeah, I mean, that was just really something. I mean, I'd heard of time under tension before I started this podcast, but I'd never really. I mean, I was just basically one of those dude bros that would just go to the gym and just work out. I didn't know any of the terms. I didn't know any of the other things, so I just went to the gym and I just worked out. But now that I've learned all that stuff, it's just been fascinating to go through the technical aspect of that. But how long into your journey before you decided, hey, I could do a bodybuilding show? This sounds like something that would be interesting to me.
Well, we first started getting back into lifting, in 2011, and I found my coach in 2013. And my initial goal, I mean, I had gained a lot of weight in pregnancy and got kind of insecure about my body. So my initial goal when I found my coach was to feel confident wearing shorts. But it was a few months after I signed up with him. I was like, you know what? Let's do something a little more awesome than wear shorts. Let's shoot for a competition. So then my first competition was just right at the beginning of 2014. So I started back then and have competed every year since. So,
Well, that's definitely shooting. That's definitely shooting for the moon. After you start going, and you say, "Hey, let's just start and go. Let's just start and get ready for a show." And that's so awesome that I mean that you really did find that. But I always ask as well, just because the general public is so misinformed when it comes to this, is I always say, if you were to poll the general public, I mean 95% of the people would not be able to get into the proper amount of shape that it takes to be able to even go on a prep, because you have to get into such great amount of shape just for that. But then when you're going on a prep, you're just notching things up to an extreme where, I mean, your diet has to be perfect. I mean, you got to get all of your workouts in. I mean, everything has to be so scientific and down pat when it comes to your prep. What was that adjustment like at first when you started into that lifestyle, and how has it evolved as your career has gone on?
well, I'm kind of lucky because my husband competes as well. He actually went pro 1 year ago at the same show I did, but a year before. But so he started prepping or following a meal plan about 6 months before I did. So everything I kind of watched him, decided, you know what, I can do that. And I mean, hell, I was prepping his meals for him, so I knew I could prep my own. But yeah, so do kind of helping him see what he did and what it took kind of eased me into it, so to speak. But yeah, it there were times, you get that craving and it's like, gosh, is this worth it? And then ultimately you have to decide what matters to you, your goals or the taste of food that you might not even remember the taste of in 10 minutes. So just and those but those are things you learn. Sometimes you give in to the food and then you realize 10 minutes later that wasn't worth it. So just learning trial and error and
That can basically be described my entire college years, as thinking that I need that food, and then as soon as you have it later, you're like, okay, was it really worth that? Going to that McDonald's at like 2 in the morning after a night of partying, basically. Yeah, it's not really worth it when you look at yourself in the mirror the next day. Yeah, I totally understand that. But when it also comes to the nutritional changes, what would you say was probably the biggest change that you had to make?
um I guess, yeah, just quitting sugar kind of. I mean, I have sugar once a week, but I love sugar. Sugar is it was just everything. Like, okay, here's a candy bar, oh, I earned this candy bar. And so I guess ultimately sugar was a reward for me. And throughout the day, oh cool, I just earned this candy bar, or oh, I did this. Oh yeah, I earned a candy bar. So
What was your go-to candy bar?
my favorite candy bar,
Yeah,
a Reese's.
that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm a Milky Way guy myself, but yeah, Reese's is really, 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 really good. Yeah, I can't. I used to be a Three Musketeers, but then when I realized that a Milky Way is basically a Three Musketeers with caramel in it. Spoiler alert for anyone out there listening. You know, but I mean, yeah, just thinking. Great. Now you got me drooling, basically thinking about all those candy bars. Now that I've been missing out on the last few months, now that I've been trying to get in my summer body. But yeah, but going into these preps, and especially going into these competitions, I always say probably the biggest thing that I never realized, that I got really enlightened on when I started having these guests on, is that for so many of these competitors, the hardest thing for them is the posing. I mean, it's harder than their nutrition. It's harder than their working out for the vast majority of them. And I like to compare it now to, I mean, you can be a great driver, you can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser, you can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
Oh, what you just said is spot on. Like you can be a really crappy driver, but you can learn. So I was terrible at first. Like I've watched some of my posing videos and like, how did my coach even put up with me? Like she probably thought I wasn't even listening to her, which I totally was, but I've never danced. I didn't have that grace that some people can have. And I thought I did. But now look.
And you kind of need to have like that sass too, and you kind of need to have that energy too that it really can't be taught too. Some people are just kind of born with that.
Yeah, well, and it's a lot of it showing your personality too. You've got to not look like, and someone can move perfectly, but still do bad because they look like a robot rather than a person with a personality doing something that they love. So that's the biggest thing for me is I've evolved from just step, step, turn to trying to have fun and show personality and still get better every time. Like you said, there's always room to be a better driver.
That is the one thing that I mean, I it just completely blew my mind. But out of your poses that you do, what is your favorite one and what is your least favorite?
My least favorite is probably the like transition, the side ones where it's just kind of killing time. And then, yeah, the front pose is my favorite just because I get to look out and see everyone and I can feel strong and powerful. So,
Well, I always said if I ever competed in bikini division, which obviously is impossible, but my favorite pose would probably be the back, just because I would be able to keep my smile down. You can kind of let your smile down. You don't have to be, I can kind of just take a breath and just be like, okay. Because believe it or not, the one thing that I found most interesting is that we had a guest on from Australia a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about how she was told that she would have placed higher, but she accidentally let her smile down for a brief period of time. And I totally had never even thought about that up until that point, that, oh yeah, they have to be smiling too the whole entire time, which I mean, your jaw muscles are probably the thing that gets in the most workout during a lot of these posing sessions. But another thing with posing that I never that I never would have guessed is that, a lot of these competitors talk about how, after these posing sessions, they're more sore than they had been even during their workouts, just because, the human body's not designed to be flexed for that amount of time, and just going through that motion can just be so tiring. And we've heard so many stories about how, like the day after a show, you're more sore than you've ever been. And it's just, I just find that so fascinating, that whole posing aspect. But yeah, it really is something that I don't think the general public understands. But now going on to a fun question, and I mean, as we can already tell, I mean, as I dread it, I'm one of the palest people you'll ever meet in your entire life, just because, I mean, my thick Norwegian skin, I mean, I am not, I got to go outside with an SPF of about 1 million, and still I'll get burnt to an absolute crisp. I mean, I was at a Minnesota Twins baseball game a couple of weeks ago, and I told my friends, I said, hey, we got to get shade seats because I don't want to sit in the sun. I was out in the sun for probably about half an hour just waiting to get the tickets, and I'm still peeling off skin right now from
oh
getting
no.
absolute burns. So I don't. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. I might be part albino. I mean, I have no idea, but it's just, I've never been tan a day in my life. I either get farmer's tan or I just get burnt to an absolute crisp. But bodybuilders get to get tan. So I always got to ask, what is that feeling like for you when you put that tan on? And we hear so many stories about, how you get to see muscles that you never even knew that you had. Everything really seems to pop out. What is that experience like for you when you get that tan on?
I always get a little stressed out about it because it's like my husband always says it's like that scene in 101 Dalmatians where they're like walking and they're covered in the soot and the drips start. It's like that one thing goes wrong and you're like one of those puppies with the drips falling on them. So I always get a little stressed out, like, I can't get by the dishwasher, or here, take this water cup for me. And but at the same time, yeah, it is really exciting because it's just kind of one of those things that ties your work together to the stage. It brings both all the work and then the stage together, and it shows everything. it just highlights your hard work. So it's really fun, but really stressful.
Well, and I didn't know for the first few guests I had on, I didn't know how it was applied and what the circumstances were. So the first time someone told me, I was like, okay, I don't believe you. And then after about the second or third guest said that, I was like, okay, actually, okay, that's actually so that even adds on to like what these competitors have to go through to get on that stage. And another thing with that tan, though, I mean, for how good it makes you, you kind of alluded to it, but I mean, you can't really sit on anything. You can't really stand up against anything. I mean, a lot of people talk about, they got to bring their own bed sheets when they go check in the
Yeah.
hotels. And
Yeah.
again, it's just fascinating all that entails when it comes to getting ready for the shows. But one thing that I found was also interesting is the heels that they have to make you guys wear. And I already say, don't these people have to go through enough already just with the preps and just with the posing? But to make them wear heels, was that an extra added struggle for you, or was it something that came naturally to you?
No, I did have to work little. I've always liked to wear like platforms and wedges, but not necessarily heels. So I could do it, but it still requires some work.
I always say one of my biggest regrets on this podcast is I had a girl from Texas on and I asked her about that. And I forgot to realize that basically girls that are from the South were basically born in high heels. So like they didn't have any problem. So then she's like, child, please. I've been wearing these since I was like 1 year. And I was like, okay, I didn't get that. So now whenever I have girls from not from the South on, I got to ask that. But whenever I have someone on from the South, I got to make sure that I just keep that question off because apparently they're all just born and raised in heels. So they have that down pat. But one thing that I like to ask all of my guests that I have on, whether they be, my up and coming bands and musicians or, bodybuilders for my bands, I always like to ask, what is that feeling like when you get to go on stage and perform live in front of hundreds to thousands of people? That also applies to the bodybuilders that I have on the show. What is that feeling like for you when you get to walk up on stage and show off all that hard work that you've worked months upon months for?
It's pretty exhilarating. It's really exciting and nerve-wracking, but I try really hard to not be nervous and just enjoy the moment and realize, this is the cherry on top of the sundae. See, sugar reference there. Um, but it and if I'm going to enjoy the cherry, I've got to be just having fun. And my husband is like the world's best cheerleader, so I'm always like, "Hey, listen for Seth," and then like just I'm just posing for him, and yeah, it's fun and it's exciting as long as you can shake off the nerves.
Hmm. When you're on stage, does time seem to slow down or does it seem to speed up or does it really depend?
It depends totally. Sometimes it's like, "Oh my gosh, this has been like an hour," and really it's 2 minutes. But then, some like the show that I went pro at, I told my husband when I got, I have no idea what even happened. That was so fast, like it was a whirlwind.
No, and I gotta say, one of our guests that we had on, her last name started with a B. So I mean, during call outs, there was like 30 people in that competition, so she was like the second one called out. So she had to stand there for like 45 minutes. Well, and it was a pro show too, so everyone had, their 90-second posing routine. So she had to stand there for like 45 minutes just completely flexing. I was like, okay, that's just ridiculous. But yeah, when I've had times too where, I think that something's gonna, last forever, and the next thing you know, you're like, oh, hey, that didn't take too long. Where especially when you think about when I was a kid, I used to have that fear of getting a shot. So whenever I'd go and get a shot, and the doctor would be like, oh, I already did it, and I'd be like, oh, that's it, yeah. So it's one of those things where it really just depends on how that happened, but. You also just recently got your pro card, and I always say that for a lot of our competitors that we have on, that is the highlight of their career, just because that is the affirmation that all of that hard work that they put into the gym has paid off and they get their pro card, they get to compete at the pro level. What was that experience like for you when you won that card and when they called your name and you realized that like, hey, I'm now officially a pro?
Oh, when they called my name, I swear I like shots, not rockets everywhere. Like, what? I was. It was just exhilarating. It was my 11th national show, so I really had to work for it. Since 2015, I've been competing nationally. So yeah, I'm still on cloud nine that it happened, and I mean it. Yeah, it was just so exciting and everything I'd been working for. So
Well, I just saw recently you posted on Instagram that you had your pro card with you, and that's just so great. Do you have any plans on when you're going to? Oh no, yeah, you said that compete. You're gonna compete in 2 weeks, is it?
Yeah, the San Antonio Pro.
San Antonio Pro. So we wish you nothing but the best of luck on that. But now we go to another fun question. What is your go-to post-show meal?
Oh, yeah. That one's an easy answer for
Hopefully it
me.
involves sugar.
Nachos and cookies. So,
Is there any like go-to place that you like to go to for that?
no, just because most of the shows we've done, we travel around. So nachos, it's hard to screw up nachos. So I just kind of try to find a good place. But cookies, my favorite cookies have been City Cakes in New York. And since I've competed in New Jersey a few times, we always get them. But yeah, again, cookies are something that's hard to mess up on. So
Yeah, well, yeah, and then that's something that I really think is really important too, because yeah, if I had my food and I got messed up, I would be not that happy of a camper. But I always say if I ever competed, I would just rent out a Five Guys, take like $1,000, just be like, hey, I'm buying you out for the night. You're gonna feed me until I either puke, pass out, or die. But either way, I'm getting my money's worth. But probably the biggest misconception that I think so many people have when it comes to competing is that so many people don't realize that that look that you guys put on stage, that is not a sustainable look. I mean, I've had so many of my friends come up to me and say, like, "Hey, I love watching the podcast. I'm just shocked that, these guests that you have on that they're not able to look like that 24/7 because I think so many people confuse like the weight loss shows like Biggest Loser to like bodybuilding where they think that hey, all these overweight people go on this show and they lose this 150 pounds and they're able to keep the weight off a good majority of them, but the people that bodybuild, they should be able to keep that look like that then too because they work their butt off for it. And I just think so many people don't realize that it is not a sustainable look. What is that like for you when you realize, or what was that like for you the first time I should say, when you realized that hey, this look that I have, I mean, I am not going to be able to keep it 24/7 because we have so many people talk about how they might get depressed or they might get anxious just realizing that all this hard work that they put into that look, they're not going to be able to keep it. How is that evolved for you too as your career has gone on? Has it gotten easier to accept that?
yeah, yeah, it has. I've never been one that's put on a ton of weight in the off season. I eat with a purpose. I try to eat to fuel my body for my workouts and to grow my muscles as much as I can, and then make it so my cuts aren't as hard as they could be if I ate nachos and cookies every day. So I try to increase my carbs and my fats in the off season and just really focus on growing shoulders or whatever it is that I'm working on that off season. Um, and then I do try to keep in check, not going too crazy too. So yes, it's hard to not be super stage lean, but I also try to not overdo it on the other side. Just find that happy medium where I just feel like an athlete and feel awesome.
Well, and that's such a hard thing for so many people too, is to find that medium because I always say, it's just so hard when you're known kind of as the bodybuilder, like throughout, maybe your group of friends or throughout other types of people, to then not just be looking like that 24/7. Because if you're known for something, I mean, let's face it, if you're known as like the athlete, you don't want to show up, like 40 pounds overweight to a social event and be like, oh, what's going on with that? But I always say the number one thing with that is that it's just like starting a business where you got to spend money to make money. You got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle. I mean, they just go hand in hand when it comes to that. But now, two of the questions that I love to ask all of my health and fitness guests that I have on. I mean, the first one for me, I mean, there's so many positive things that happened when, I started going to the gym and getting bigger and stronger. But one of the negatives is that you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars or bottled waters. It doesn't matter. I mean, anything that's sealed on tight, you are going to get asked to do. And I'm still at home with my parents for 2 months before I move out. And every single time that they bring home groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and carry in the groceries, being the good son that I am. But has that been a similar experience with you, or especially when you're in prep now, where people take a look at you and they just assume that you can do favors for them?
Well, for me, I think it might be a little different. Like,
Well,
yes,
I was gonna say, since your husband's a bodybuilder, that might make things a little easier. Yeah.
it does. And he's massive. He was a super heavyweight and he's over 300 pounds right now.
Holy crap.
For me, it's more everyone wants to know what I'm eating. What is in that bowl? What's in that Tupperware? So I mean, it might be their first time asking, "What are you eating?" But I'm like, this is like the 200th time I've told someone about what is in this bowl. So for me, yeah, just explaining what I'm eating and then why. Oh my gosh, wait, you can eat carbs? Carbs aren't bad. Or no, that's bad for you. Just explain, just explaining, no, nothing's bad for you. It's just if you eat too much, it's bad for you. So,
Well, I can't even imagine what that must be like, but for me, the closest thing is that when I was in college, I was in a better shape than I am now just because now I have a 40-hour-a-week job on top of this podcast, so I mean, I still work out, 3 or 4 times a week, but, not as much as I used to, but just going to bars all the time and just getting asked to arm wrestle all the time. All the time. I mean, I didn't understand that. Like I was like, okay, if you want to like actually like test like a real thing of strength, let's just go to a gym and do like a military press off or something like that. But yeah, I never did understand that at all. But I always say for me, it's a double edged sword being 6'3", where I'm gonna get asked to move people's furniture or help them out no matter what. I mean, literally 2 days ago, I got a text from a friend saying, "Hey, I'm moving out next weekend. You want to come help me move my parent or move my furniture?" And I told him, I said, "Look, I don't want to, but I will anyway, just because being the good friend that I am, but don't expect me to have a smile on my face the entire time that I'm doing it." So, yeah, there's that. But now the other question that I love to ask, and it's our audience favorite question. Obviously, when it comes to the clothing options for fit women, your clothing options can be limited. I mean, the one positive though that you said about, your shoulders take a little bit longer to grow is that I always say if you have big broad shoulders, dresses aren't your best friend sometimes. So I mean, you lucked out a little bit on that, but I always like to say, jeans are another thing too where I mean, if you have a big lower body and a small waist, jeans are not made for that. Well, how have been some ways that you have found to compensate for the fact that your clothing options can be very limited and the fact that I mean, when you're on prep and when you're on your off season, you basically have to have 2 different types of wardrobes.
yeah. Well, stretchy stuff, which is great for women, kind of like Nacho Libre with his stretchy pants. Um, I wear a lot of leggings and I work a 40-hour job too, and I have to dress kind of nice there. So skirts are nice and they can have a nice stretchy waist. And then I am all about t-shirts. I'm like, I probably push the line a little too much at work. Like, is this a little too casual? Maybe, but I'm gonna try it. But yeah, skirts or like leggings with pockets. I count those as dress pants. And then t-shirts and button-up blouses and then gym clothes. Like I come home and I change back into gym clothes.
I literally okay, so this is gonna be a telling thing. So I work at UPS, and part of my job is because I'm a supervisor, so that you have to wear like these nice sort of pants like this. But since I do have a little bit bigger legs. I mean, even though my friends like to give me crap about it, and these pants, and I do move around a lot, you get a lot of rips like that happen on your
Oh
pants
wow.
yeah, you get a lot of rips like that. That happened. So now I've been working there for over a year. That is the fifth pair of pants that is ripped on me at work. So anyone out there that has anything for stretchy pants that really work on that. Now, luckily, no one's ever seen it when it's ripped, and then I walk out, with my legs basically, magnetized together so that like no one can see anything. But it's just yeah. If anyone has any suggestions, and for especially women too, because I always say I had 2 fashion designers come on the podcast, and I told them, I said, hey, I have all these guests that come on that they're looking for some clothing options, so just make something, but they haven't got on it yet. But I always say, that's one thing that a lot of my guests, they really really want. But you're also now a mom of 2, and I always say, being a mom, that is a full-time job in and of itself. And just, the fact that you just said too that you have a 40-hour job on top of that, and you compete in bodybuilding. What is your time management like? It must just be so down point because that's basically 3 full-time jobs. I mean, being a bodybuilder can be a full-time job in and of itself too. So what is it like to just have all of that stuff on your plate?
I have every day, yeah, I have a schedule and a routine and I stick to it to the T. My kids are used to it. My husband, yeah, he obviously has to have a routine of his own. He does shift work, so for him, so a lot of it is okay. Is Seth on day shift or night shift? So I need to do this or that. And then when my kids on summer, they get a little leeway, but we all have a routine. I've established all of it. In the summer, yeah, which is right now, they get to sleep in, they get to stay up a little later, but during the school year, they know mom means business. But yeah, I work out and I do everything as far as that before they wake up, so I don't miss mom time. um, for this. I don't want them to sacrifice for me. So that's my job as a mom is to sacrifice for them. So
And that's, I mean, you couldn't have put it better when it comes to that. And I always say too, it's just so important to have that positive example for the kids too. That, I mean, when you have a really fit mom and you have a really fit dad, I mean, they get the best of both worlds. Because I had a health and fitness specialist come on, and he was talking about, how with the obesity crisis, it's so important to have that positive influence. I mean, it's been proven that kids that have fit parents are vastly more likely to continue and have a healthy lifestyle of their own, just because they are kind of given the keys, and they kind of know ahead of time, what to do to help themselves get a healthy lifestyle. How important is that for you too, for you and your husband, to set that positive example for your kids, so that they have those keys, so that they can be healthy individuals as well when they get older?
it is so important to us. We actually just last year, well, a year ago for my one son and half a year for my other son, bought them both gym memberships. And like Saturday morning, I went and trained, came home, woke them up, and brought them to the gym and trained them while my husband was still lifting. And just giving them, they love lifting and they love the confidence and they think it's really fun because everybody at the gym thinks they're awesome that they're there and lifting weights. And um, it's just so fun, but it's so important. And I think helping them find the fun in help will help them in their future. And then we've taught them all about protein, carbs, and fats and trying to make good choices, but also not trying to make them feel like they're missing out on things. Like ultimately, if they want this, I'm going to let them have it. But I let them know, okay, well, it has this and this. So maybe later in the day, you need to cut this. And then they were just eating with my brother a couple weeks ago. And my son said, oh, I'm not eating that. I've had way too many carbs. My brother was like, what have you done to them? Like, hey, they're just aware.
No, yeah, and that's so important too. To just, I mean, because I mean, I didn't know any of this stuff until I was basically in college. If I would have known ahead of time, now luckily I have that body type where I was basically like a twig. So I mean, because I was 6'3" since I was like in eighth grade, basically. So I was just one of those kids that, I mean, it was just, yeah, I was just so it's taken me a while to even put on anything. But yeah, I always said, like, if I had a different body type, I would have been probably about 350 pounds. Just the way that I ate. I had a lucky metabolism where, I mean, I could get away with, a lot of stuff. So yeah, and it's just so important to find those healthy alternatives, and to really just realize that, hey, especially once you're younger, you're gonna have a better metabolism, but it's gonna get interesting as you get older. I mean, I just turned 25 a couple weeks ago, so I realize I'm slowly getting into that part where, my metabolism is slowly starting to, get harder and harder to, have a chocolate shake without, having to go on a extended run before I can feel, healthy again. But now we go to our audience favorite part of the podcast, and my personal favorite part, the little questionnaire where we're gonna ask Nicole here about a half a dozen or so health and fitness related questions that we ask all of our guests, and see how her answers stack up to all of our other guests. So for our first question, what is one item that you always need to have in your fridge at all times?
Vegetables.
Any particular vegetable that you enjoy the most?
I love cauliflower and broccoli. So,
Here's how you can tell how Midwestern I am. When I was young, my parents used to do the thing where they'll be like, "Hey, we'll give you like $1 if you finish your broccoli or you finish your cauliflower." I used to just absolutely make a mound of ketchup and just put all my broccoli and cauliflower just in the ketchup, to the point of where I couldn't even taste the broccoli or the cauliflower just because of all the ketchup on it. So hey, I found a way to get my dollar's worth. But yeah, now I enjoy broccoli and cauliflower. But that brought up because we had a guest on who used to live in Wisconsin, and then she moved out, and I told her that story, and she goes, "Oh, you're so from the Midwest. Like, that's the most Midwestern thing I've ever heard, just dousing broccoli and ketchup." That's how I got my money's worth. I made money back in the day, by basically, tricking my parents. But yeah, I always said, egg whites probably for me, but I ate eggs so much where it got to the point where it was hard digesting them, because if you had, the same thing every single day for such a long time. I used to work out, have chicken and eggs waiting for me, but yeah, now it got to the point where I can't really eat eggs as much. But now, out of all of your followers that you have on Instagram, what would be one thing that you think that all of your followers would find interesting, or they'd be surprised to find out about you if they met you in person?
um, I think a lot of them are always surprised when they find out my boys were both 10 pounders. Um, they were 10-pound babies. My husband was 10.8 when he was born. So I was like, Maybe I should have known that beforehand. And
Are you giving birth to giants or something?
yeah, basically, like, oh, and my gosh, those two and my husband, they can eat. So, yeah, these three boys of mine, they keep me on my toes.
Yeah, well, that's I mean, I'm the tallest person in my family, but yeah, I have two other brothers too. But yeah, our poor mom and that food bill when we were growing up, our mom and our dad, they probably had to work a little overtime just because we were eating so much. But yeah, I just that's just fascinating. And yeah, that's for me. I'd always say the 6'3" part, but I mean, I'm always sitting down, so no one would ever be able to tell that just from looking at me. But if someone were to walk up to you and say, Nicole, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
Um, well, with it would be within bikini. I think that there's kind of just a set few color of suits that look good on stage. And then there's some they just don't look good. The suit may be beautiful, but it doesn't look good. I would make it so every suit look good. Because I love some of the colors that I can't wear. They would look terrible on me up there. So I would make all suits look good.
That actually adds me into a new question that I've never asked before. What are you looking for in a suit when it comes to choosing one? I've never asked that question to a guest before. Is there a certain criteria that you sort of have like as a checklist to like what a suit must look like for you to wear it, or do you just sort of pick one that you like the most?
Well, there's a suit maker here locally, Bonnie. She does platinum suits by Bonnie, and I just trust her. She knows what colors look good. She matches my skin tones, and then yeah, I just like it to be super sparkly. So that's my main thing.
What color would you say looks best on stage?
Well, it varies, but they're blues, reds, purples. I've been wearing aqua the last couple years just because it looks good on me and my skin and my hair color. So I love it. I think it's probably my favorite color I've ever worn.
I
So
was gonna say we don't. I never have seen really any pink or yellow. Basically, those seem to be two of the colors that really, or orange. Some I've seen a few orange, but yeah, it doesn't really seem to be that much of a thing. And but for that answer, for when it comes to one thing that people would change, the answer that I was most shocked by is that well now I say it like duh obviously is the fact that a lot of judges, I mean, there's human error when it comes to judging, and the fact that the different shows judges might want different things. Where I always say, if you were to do shows back to back, one week, they might want a little bit more of a leaner look, a little bit more of a not so shredded look, and then the next week they might want that shredded look. Where it's like, good luck for these competitors making that change in a week. I mean, it's like I don't know what secret pill or anything that they can take, that's gonna make them vastly change like that over a week, but just find more of a common ground of what like a generalized physique that they want. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's one thing that I would, say is really one thing that I totally agree with now as well. But for the last few questions of the questionnaire, if you could go back in time and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, what would be the best piece of advice you would give her?
I would tell myself I mean, I wish I had started weightlifting sooner. Um, but when I was 18, I wasn't the most confident. I just didn't really care about myself. And I would try to instill that in myself sooner that, I'm capable of anything that I want. I'm a hard worker and I can achieve what I want. I just need to believe in myself and put my mind to it. So I would tell myself, do it.
No, I would say that as well. I would tell myself, start this podcast earlier in your life, and also, just keep going, keep being in shape because that's when I really started. I'd also give myself some stock advice too. Maybe invest a little bit in Apple, invest a little bit in Amazon.
Little
Might
Facebook.
help. Yeah, a little bit Facebook. Might help you a little bit down the road. So yeah, I would definitely do that as well. But out of all of the memories that you've made from bodybuilding and just this healthy and fit lifestyle, what has probably been your favorite moment from this lifestyle that you've adapted?
Um, well, before a couple weeks ago, it would have definitely been when my husband went pro. Oh, it was so exciting. Watching him up there and screaming, and I thought I was gonna like pass out with all these nerves. Um, it was that, and now I would say my moment up there is tied with it. It both of us doing it and on the same stage, and nothing compares to it.
I mean, I can't even imagine what that must be like, but I mean, I'm just so happy that you're able to finally experience that because we've had so many guests come on where it's like, "Oh yeah, my first show I got my pro card." And it's like, "Okay, screw you," basically. And then we had people too that have been like, "Oh yeah, like my 25th show I got my pro card now." So it's just a vast change in who
I
gets their
feel
pro
like
card
I
at what.
appreciate it a little bit
Yeah.
more knowing that I worked a little bit longer.
Oh, absolutely. I think yeah, if you got it at your first show, it'd kind of be a little bit more lackadaisical, where you just be like, "Oh yeah, it's great and whatnot." But one thing that I found so interesting about the bodybuilding community, guys and girls, is that it's the one sport I think where the athletes generally do care about each other. I mean, you see so many other sports where they might act like they do, but really deep down, they don't really care as much. But with bodybuilding, just the support emotionally and mentally that you get from people just online. I mean, if you look at any of these competitors' posts, you'll see, dozens of other competitors, commenting, "Wow, you look amazing." And then you see these behind the stage, shots of, them all huddled together and, just the camaraderie that bodybuilding gives to the individual who's competing. How important is that to you, knowing that, I mean, a lot of these girls, they have your back, and I mean, everyone is just so supportive and so just happy that, they're able to share this journey with others.
It's so important, and it's important for me to do that for other competitors too. I mean, I love the sport. I want everyone to love it. I want to support everyone and encourage everyone, and just like they do me. And I mean, it really is kind of surprising how awesome and how positive it is. Like I've never had a moment where someone was catty or rude that I can think of, which is awesome. And it's been nothing but a positive, and it being positive matters so much to me. So,
Yeah, and that's just such a great thing that I don't think that many other sports have. But for our last question of the questionnaire, if we were to talk to you a year from today, what are some goals that you'd like to have, in bodybuilding? What are some goals that you'd like to have just in your overall life? What are some things that you would have liked to have achieved if we were to talk to you a year from today?
well, I want to continue loving competing. I've always competed because I loved it. Obviously, doing 11 national shows to earn my pro card, I've got to love it to keep pushing that hard. My goal now, I don't foresee me getting Olympia points or anything, but I want to continue to love doing this and to remain positive and happy within the industry. I want to keep focusing on my kids' health and just teaching them good things, and my marriage. Like my kids and my marriage are the most important thing to me. I love my husband, I love my kids, and then and I think having this hobby and being happy within it make me better as a wife and as a mom. So I just want to focus on continuing to progress.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. And now, lastly, I love to hear prep brain stories because they're kind of like I kind of like to just keep them in a box and just have them out. And for those of you who might not know prep brain, I mean, when you're dieted down for these shows, sometimes your brain can play some tricks on you. I mean, we've had some funny stories, but now, I mean, knowing that you have such a busy schedule and the fact that, I mean, you have kids too to take care of, do you have any funny prep brain stories that you can share with us?
I mean, I can't tell you how many uh coffee pots of water I've brewed, like that I forgot to put the grinds in, and oh, talk about rip your heart out. You go to pour a cup of coffee and it's hot water. Like, come on. I need my coffee. So yeah, caffeine helps prep brain, but I've got to be able to get the caffeine.
I mean, I had one time where I tried. I mean, it wasn't really a prep, but I just been so dieted down when it was like 2 years ago where I was going, I was leaving work. I didn't know where my car keys were, and I'd looked around for them for 5 minutes before I realized that they were in my hand the entire time.
Okay, yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
But I've done it not in prep too.
Yeah. Well, I did. Well, and to be honest, I was just getting off like a 14-hour shift too. So, I mean, I was a little off there. So, yeah, but yeah, I mean, just, as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, yeah, that's my prep brain. It's like a prep brain ish type thing, I guess. But now, lastly, do you have anybody that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Hi to my husband, hi to my sons. I know they'll watch this, and yeah.
That's awesome. And again, you guys, we cannot thank Nicole enough for being on the podcast. Everyone go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link down below in the description. And Nicole, we cannot thank you enough for coming on. I mean, you are a great guest, and it was so great to hear, your journey. And we cannot wish you more luck on that show that you have coming up in the next couple of weeks. We'd love to hear about how you do. I think that you're going to do great. But again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This has been so fun.
Absolutely. And again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.